Welcome, everyone, to the Suburban Saturn. This is your friend, Ed, to the end. And today we're going to have another tea chat. And I promise you, I'll get back to regular essay formats. It's not like any of you guys are watching, anyways, but in case you are, we'll go back to some of the essay video formats with a little bit more editing effort into it. For now, I find these tea chats incredibly convenient because, in my opinion, they're pretty high quality, high signal, but they're kind of easy to do because I don't have to prep much. I can just stream of thought ideas and transfer them onto you, my knowledge, I suppose. So, in any case, today I wanted to talk about veganism. Consider this my reattempt, my redux, my encore. Billie Eilish was making the media news coverage because she had made some inflammatory comments. You can't say you love animals and eat meat. And so, while obviously I don't actually think that's like a true statement, I do think that it is possible to like love your dog, for example, and then also eat meat. That's an example of loving animals, I guess, and also eating meat. But I get her point. A lot of people will say things like, I love animals, and then eat meat unironically, whether it's fish or cow or pork or even chicken. They don't seem to mind partaking in the perpetuation of these awful supply chains and the amount of animal cruelty and suffering that happens at scale because of the animal farming industry. It's probably it's probably one of the worst things we've done as a species. And I mean that. And I think this is where, if you are not a vegan, this kind of language might be triggering you right now. So, as I say this, you might be feeling all sorts of ways. You might be thinking, oh, look at these self righteous vegans think that they're better. Well, there's probably a lot of aphids and animals that die in the production of your frickin' soybeans or your dandelion greens or whatever. And while that's true, there are a lot of animals that could die as a result of farming and cropping, even plant based products. I think we all know that that completely obfuscates from the reality, and it continues to allow individuals to disassociate from the very real things we do to animals in the name of nutrition. And it's not nutritious to eat a stressed out animal's carcass, and to cook it, and especially because a lot of these practices of animal farming, at scale, rely on hormones and beefing up animals in order to make them bigger than they would actually grow in the wild, so that it can feed more people with less stock, right? So one cow made fat can sell a lot more than one cow just made to graze like a regular cow would. And then you, the consumer, would then ingest a lot of those hormones as a byproduct, right? Whenever we eat food, our muscle in particular likes to absorb protein. So you'd be absorbing the protein of a cow who was injected with or fed all sorts of hormones and pumped to be made bigger. That would then also affect you. And I mean, I don't want to make the case about why eating meat and eating that kind of meat could be really bad for you. I think the science is already pretty clear that no matter what, a plant-based diet is just the best in terms of health span and longevity. That's just the science. What can we do? Um, you could get upset about that, right? But why? So yeah. the big question of why, if the science is pretty clear that a plant-based diet is the best for your health span and longevity, meaning you live longer and you live longer healthier, why are we then perpetuating the myth that we need to eat meat in order to stay healthy and to be able to focus? Now, think about that for a second, right? High red meat consumption is highly correlated with coronary heart disease. So, plant based diets are the best in terms of maintaining your health and your vitality. So the science is clear on this. Again, you don't have to take my word for it. Go ahead and ask ChatGPT or ask Gemini or go ahead and Google it and do the research. And even if you do find conflicting information, some people might be like, oh, aren't or some science journals might say, hey, omnivore diets are actually en masse the healthiest. No one's going to tell you unless it's really fringy. No one's really going to say that plant-based diets are bad, and that's just the reality. So pretending like we as a species cannot, like as an individual, for example, pretending like your mind and your body is incapable of functioning on a plant-based diet, that you must eat meat, actually goes against the science. And I mean, yeah, I'm not discounting that from experience you could feel like shit when you don't have meat, right? And that actually might have to do more with habituation and your body having been accustomed to eating a certain kind of food and no longer getting it, much like a withdrawal. Like if you smoke every day and then all of a sudden you don't smoke for one day, it's going to be really tough. That one day is going to feel really awkward for you. And maybe if you don't smoke for 2 days, it's going to be really, really tough, right? And we get it, overcoming an addiction, can have a physical toll on you. Now, I want you to think about food in those terms of habituation. We don't even have to call it addiction, right? We could just call it a habituation of a certain kind of fuel source. If that is all of a sudden shifted and taken away from you, and you're told to rely on a fuel source that you're not accustomed to, yes, that's going to be tough on you psychologically and physically. And that might make you feel like crap in the short term. And by short term, we don't really just mean like, 1 or 2 days. We're talking about, at the very least, like six to 12 months. And yeah, that sounds like a long time, but in reality, if you think about it, if you're in your early 20s, you've gone 20 years of your life eating certain kinds of foods and eating in a very specific way. So, of course, going 1 year of your life, kind of rewiring your habits and your conditioning your body to run off different fuel source, i.e. making yourself metabolically flexible, um, is is short relative to how much of your life you've gone not conditioning yourself in that way, right? So, but it is not 2 3 weeks you'll feel amazing again. It's not going to be that easy because again you're trying to rewire years and years, in some cases decades of habituation. And trust me when I say that it's a lot easier to do it when you're younger than when you get older. When you're younger, you still have the drive and the motivation, and you could bounce back relatively quickly. And when you get older, normally it takes a more serious life event or health scare to motivate a drastic change. So it can become more difficult to try to undo your decades of calcification in habits. So in any case, it's tough on the body and on the mind. That's one of the things I wanted to get out of the way. So I don't want to invalidate that. But once you get over that hump and that adaption period or adaptation period, you will find yourself running off of a very clean fuel source. Like you'll feel sharp. You'll be able to remember a lot more. You'll have the capacity and the endurance and resilience to take on just way more workload, whether it's physical, if you are a very active person and you like to bike, run, sprint, workout, lift, body lift, whatever, you'll find yourself having tons of energy to do that. If you're an individual that likes to read, that use, codes or does a lot of videos or edits and spends a ton of time behind the computer, you'll find you'll have the mental capacity and bandwidth to take on this sort of workload. And trust me, it's pretty good. And I take it from someone like me who has been, I don't know, doing OMAD paired with a plant-based diet. And for those of you guys who don't know what OMAD is, it's one main meal a day. It's a form of intermittent fasting that usually narrows down the eating window to about 4 hours. In my case, I do about 2 hours every day. And it basically, you have to get all your calories in within that window. And you don't necessarily have to just eat one meal. It's just eat as much as you can within the window and try to get your minimum calories in, because otherwise it could be really tough. Someone like me who's plant-based and doing OMAD, and I'm surfing, running, doing sprints still, and playing soccer at my older age now. And then I'm still, doing a lot of breath work. I'm coding a lot. I'm doing YouTube now, and I work my full-time job while being plant-based, while eating, only one main meal a day. If I could do it, you can definitely do it. And now I've been doing it for about 8 years now, and paired with a plant-based diet. And so totally doable. I mean, I'm not gonna boast to be the healthiest person ever, but I'm, pretty athletic and in decent shape for someone in their 30s. And yeah, I feel great. I feel like I could still keep going from here and developing, and I don't feel like I've hit a wall. And yes, my body is different now in my 30s than it was in my 20s. For example, I could still sprint, and I could still sprint pretty fast, but I do feel the drag now of older age and the achiness and the recovery that maybe I didn't feel as much when I was younger. And that's totally fine, because it's all right. It's not always about just being able to be an explosive performer. I'm not a professional athlete, so there's no need for me to worry about my explosivity and my ability to keep up with a 20-year-old when it comes to sprinting, right? But um, I'm still able to perform much better than most people my age. And again, I'm on a plant-based diet, one main meal a day, and I feel great, So yeah, there's that. And that's more on the health side of things. We could tackle the vegan question from many different angles, because veganism itself isn't a diet, right? Being plant-based is a diet. So if you're going to stop eating animal products, that's great. You probably are going plant-based. But veganism is more akin to like a religion, or a spiritual practice. It is just that. Veganism is a spiritual practice. If you want to be more practical about it, it's a lifestyle that chooses to prioritize animal well-being um, over immediate gratification in consumptions immediate gratification in the consumption of things that are not necessary, especially if the consumption of that thing means something with sentience and consciousness has to die as a byproduct, as a necessity for you to enjoy that good and that consumer good, right? So if you think of a burger, yes, you can have a burger that's plant-based, but if you choose not to have one that's plant-based, you would need to kill a cow or a pig, or a chicken in order to put that in your sandwich and call it a burger. Now, the idea of making a patty out of beans exists. It's been around forever, but people still choose to buy the cow, right? Or choose to buy the pig or choose to buy the chicken. And that is where vegans say, no, I'm not going to buy that or consume that. And I'm actually going to raise awareness about the alternatives because, um, unfortunately, when people disassociate about the reality of these supply chains and choose to just continue to consume burgers that are not plant-based or hot dogs or whatever your animal-based meal is, when you choose to consume just animal products, then you're voting to perpetuate these systems and these supply chains, and you're saying, hey, we want more. You're demanding more, right? So vegans try to raise awareness about the cruelty that takes place at scale and about what you're actually consuming and the real cost of consuming those products, right? Not just the $1.50 is going to cost you to buy that burger, but the real cost, the psychological toll it takes on a lot of workers in these meat packing factories or in these slaughterhouses. A lot of the obviously the psychological torment that happens to these animals, especially in the last moments when they're about to die. The suffering is crazy. I mean, honestly, it's at a scale that it's hard for us to truly comprehend. But it's so easy to disassociate and just, hey, here's my card, let me get that burger and whatever. Man, vegans are too radical. Vegans, man, they just kind of ruin everything. Enter Billie Eilish again. And someone like Billie Eilish, I mean, I love that she is as big as she is, and she uses her platforms to talk about the vegan question, because again, veganism is more like a spiritual practice. It's you choosing to raise awareness of animal sentience and consciousness and fight against it, and to reduce your animal consumption as practically as possible. And this is a key thing, right? That's often used against vegans. Again, the argument of futility, that because you can't be perfect, somehow you shouldn't even try. So yeah, let's just keep eating burgers, guys, because some animal somewhere might die in the production of plants. So because you can't avoid that, then continue to kill all these cows and all these pigs. It's one of the more bizarre and ridiculous arguments, honestly, you hear as a vegan. Is this, yeah, but you're not perfect, so therefore continue to consume animals, right? And it's not about perfection. Veganism is just about reducing your contribution to the suffering of animals where it's as where you can. The operative word is where, the practicably, which means that in life, in our society, in our supply chains, you're going to be uh, finding yourself consuming or ingesting or having to use something that has some sort of animal byproduct in it, right? So maybe a pill or a capsule that you take has a little gelatin, right? Or maybe I don't know, you took a vaccine and it was tested on animals, or you can insert whatever it is that you want here. It, you're going to find yourself living in a society where animal byproducts are everywhere, just everywhere. So it's not about perfection. There is no vegan god or police that's going to show up in your house like in that movie Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where they'll come by and take your vegan card away if you do something that I don't know doesn't comport with someone's opinion, some vegan's opinion out there online. That's just not the way things work. We are not evangelists. We're not fundamentalists. It's a praxis. You do what you can, and yeah, it's not about perfection. And as a matter of fact, a lot of like people like me, for example, are very salty about the fact that our tax dollars are used to subsidize meat and dairy products for people, and that means my taxpayer dollars are still being used to make the consumption and the suffering and the facilitation of this suffering at scale possible and cheaper for people to buy. And so that kind of stuff is it's so aggravating. You have to understand like that, again, it's the systems we live in, right? If you pair that with like what we're doing to the natural world, like, we're chopping down the Amazon forest to be able to plant soya beans so that, we can feed cows, not us, not people, but cows, so that then we can slaughter those cows and feed them back to you, the people who will get sick and coronary heart disease as a result, and then probably die a lot earlier. It's hellish cycle that, honestly, it blows my mind how disassociated and happy and pacified people are or around that. Like, if more people truly understood how twisted this supply chain is, right? That we are chopping down the Amazon, basically the lungs of the world, so that we can feed cows, so that we can also slaughter those cows, so that then we can feed people these processed slaughtered cows to make $1.50 per burger. Does that justify the life of the cow? Does that justify the uprooting and basically decimation of trees and the ecosystems that are dependent on that? Does it justify that? Like, it truly blows my mind. And then at the end of the day, the consumer ends up sick anyways, because that shit's bad for you, man. Like, it's so mind blowing. Anyway, so yeah, vegans are angry, like me, for example, because of that kind of stuff, right? This is the kind of things we have to deal with. We're told we're self righteous. We're told that we're not empathetic, to other people's like living conditions. Like, someone will say, "Hey, well, what about these Inuits? What are they going to do to live?" It's like, okay, but that's different than you, the suburban guy in LA County, or in somewhere in San Diego, chilling with in and outs everywhere. It's like you also have Whole Foods there, dudes, so it's just crazy. So many farmers markets that sell so much produce, so much fruit every week, in some neighborhood here in Southern California. There's really just no justification to pretend like, because some Inuit somewhere in the world has to survive off meat, that you now basically have a free pass to just be obnoxious about your eating habits and about your arguments, as to why people like me, a vegan, shouldn't be fighting, or advocating on behalf of the voiceless creatures, that very clearly have sentience. So yeah, veganism is about your love for the animals, your activism basically on behalf of the animals. It is a spiritual thing, because at the end of the day, again, we live in a society that tells us we need to shut up and take it, and if we don't, that we are the problem, right? And honestly, I don't mind fighting for animals and coming off as rude to other people, because or triggering other people, because I kind of call it for what it is. I mean, again, veganism is about the animals. So if you decide to go plant-based, don't call yourself a vegan yet. It really has to be a spiritual calling. I think a lot of the mistakes that people have made in the past is that they finally come to that realization that animals are suffering at scale, but that kind of excitement then might lead them to want to become vegan and adopt the label, almost like, they're going to wear it as a result to try to manifest becoming it, and unfortunately that can have a lot of issues too, because, and I don't like this, because yes, we want people to want to become vegans, but there have been way too many instances of people who get too excited about it, jump in head first, don't know how to sustain it, and then fall back and be like, "Hey, actually, I'm back to eating meat, and it was just really hard to eat a plant-based diet. I don't know how people do it." And actually, if you think about it, vegans are kind of crazy, and it's actually not healthy to eat that way. And it's like they go 180 the other direction. So it's like they want to be vegans, they get excited about it, they're like, "Yay!" And then they find it difficult to keep up with the lifestyle change, so they revert back, and then they have to gaslight everyone else by saying that it was actually the vegans that are the problem, not me. But again, look at the literature. look at the living examples. And by the literature, I mean the scientific literature about plant-based diets. Uh, your subjective experience is quite literally just that, a subjective experience. You couldn't manage a transition, and as a result, you fall back to habits that, you relapsed, and it's totally fine, man. I mean, we're all human. But then you shouldn't turn around and then pretend like the movement is bad or it's unhealthy to eat this way, even though the scientific literature says it pretty much is super healthy to eat this way, even for children. You shouldn't then turn around and try to pretend that like the vegans are the problem because of your inability to adapt and keep up with the lifestyle. And we've seen that happen with so many YouTubers, for example, Alex O'Connor, Cosmic Skeptic. I mean, honestly, what a letdown. He was so excited to beat other people over with the head of vegans are better. I'm a vegan, like I remember that talk with Matt Dillahunty where he came in and telling Matt Dillahunty why, he's pretty much a bad person for not conceding that like animal cruelty is a thing and animal suffering is a thing, and that being vegan is a morally superior position than not being vegan. And apparently, like, this is why Alex O'Connor said he went vegan to begin with, because it was I guess a morally superior position, or at the very least it was a position that was seen as like a more moral one, I suppose, from a secular humanist point of view. And as a result, tried to adopt the lifestyle, and basically failed. And when he failed, he then started to say, well, actually, bodybuilders who are plant-based can't really be vegan because they're consuming in excess of plants where they otherwise shouldn't be. So now, according to Alex, vegans are also, what do you call them, low waste consumers as well. So I mean, this is the kind of stuff that is so frustrating to deal with. It's like, again, dude, you could have just not done any of that, right? You could have just not gone and try to weaponize, the higher ground of the vegan movement, to tell other people why they're morally inferior. Anyways, there was just no need to do that, and it harms the movement whenever people come out and they're like, "Oh, actually, I couldn't keep up with the lifestyle, so yeah, I'm no longer vegan." And moreover, veganism's actually bad, and being plant-based is actually bad. And do you know that plants are toxic? It's like, shut the up, please. Like, move on. If it's not for you, it's not for you. Fine, get out. Like, it's totally fine. I mean, not really. I prefer more people go plant based if they live in areas where they can. I mean, just wanted to try to take the opportunity of the whole Billie Eilish thing to talk about some of my feelings about the movement and about veganism and about why I get the kinds of inflammatory comments she makes. And honestly, like, it does spark the conversation. And I love that she uses her platform to advocate for animals and advocate for better consumer habits, because at the end of the day, you, the consumer, will benefit more from eating plant-based than from eating, you know, animal carcass that are pumped up with all sorts of stuff, to make it more addicting and palatable. At the end of the day, the taste is not worth the life of the animal, and the taste is not worth the health of you, the human animal. So yeah, I wanted to express about veganism, and yeah, the difference between just being plant-based and being a vegan. One is more of a diet. You're choosing not to eat animal products, and that's great. But the other one is more of a spiritual practice, um, a lifestyle, a praxis, something that you do day to day, and that you take day to day, and that you do the best you can, with the intention of minimizing suffering for animals. So anyways, that's all I had for this one, fam. Yeah, thank you for sticking around. More videos next month to come that are actually structured and have a little bit more editing flair to it. But yeah, much love to you all. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Peace.